Welcome to the Empowered Women Life Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Karen Bashford. This podcast is for every woman who has ever felt limited by her past, silenced by trauma, or held back by society's expectations. Each week, we will share powerful stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you become the leader of your own life. This week, I am talking about something that might not necessarily mean very much to you, but has proved to be very insightful to me. Partly because it's made me realize just how much our bodies know what to do. And as you've listened previously, I talk a lot about knowing you and your body-mind connection. But this was quite interesting. It started probably about 3 weeks ago, perhaps even a month ago, when, without realizing it, I started to have hearing issues. I did realize it, but I didn't, if that sort of makes sense, in that I was very much aware that my hearing had deteriorated. And I felt as though something was blocking my ears. So I did all the usual things of trying to clear it with earbuds or similar, olive oil, and helping to release any wax that was stuck. But it didn't seem to make any difference. It was almost as if I was being blocked from hearing the people around me. And that proved a bit embarrassing in networking because I'd be nodding saying yes, not hearing half of what was being said, which proved enlightening. Luckily, I didn't agree to anything I shouldn't have agreed to, which probably helped no end. Anyway, carrying on, I then started to get vertigo. If you've ever had vertigo, it's like standing up and your world is tilting and there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot walk straight. You cannot stand straight. In actual fact, even laying down feels as though your world is tilting. But what was horrendous was the fact that I woke up one night time about 2-ish and realized that the world was spinning. Apparently, what had happened was there are tiny crystals in your ears, and those crystals need to be in a certain position for your eyes to be able to register where you are in your environment. And if those crystals come out of alignment for any reason, in my case, there is massive inflammation from an infection, it will cause your eyes to spin. And that's what happened. Now, the thing about it was, I cannot, as lots of you may know, take antibiotics. So going to the doctor was never an option. I had to be able to handle this myself. I was already seeing an acupuncturist because my body was overheating. I was also aware that the fact there was something wrong with my hearing. So I had to get to the acupuncturist. The trouble is, where I live, and because of my vertigo, getting on a bus was going to be a problem. And also, even if I got on the bus, getting from where the bus stop was on the main road to where the acupuncturist was meant a long walk, not something I could do with vertigo. So I used some wonderful techniques I have including homeopathic remedies, including tapping to release any emotions and such like. I actually got to that point that I could walk so long as I had my walking poles to balance me, and so long as I kept my head fairly straight, I was fine. So I drove myself there. I saw the acupuncturist home. And yes, it did help. However, even though we were still working on my ears, the infection seemed to be getting worse. And I did learn something as well, that in Chinese medicine, or in shiatsu, even reflexology, on several other methodologies that are used for predicting if there is infection, your tongue goes furry, but it also goes with a tint of yellow. The deeper the yellow, the more infection, the more there is inflammation. And I've actually been watching as I've taken tablets to deal with the infection of my ears initially, Chinese herbal medicine in this case, which did a wonderful job, but it didn't clear all the infection. And it wasn't until I went back to the acupuncturist and I said, well, the ears seem to be slightly better, but now the sinuses seem to be blocked. And there's obviously a connection. I couldn't hear, and now I couldn't breathe. And when I look back now, and I've still got a slight sinus infection, but it's considerably better. My tongue isn't yellow. It's now a very sort of mottled yellow, very, very light yellow. But there was a connection in that I was so hurt by the loss of my cat Saffy that I didn't want to hear the world. And I felt the need to be cocooned in my own home. So consequently, it was easier to find an excuse by saying I had vertigo. And I also realized that the blockage in my sinuses was that I didn't want to cry. It was embarrassing to cry at times. So to stop me crying, I actually let my body produce this infection, which made crying very, very uncomfortable. So I had excuses to not to cry, to not to go out and to hibernate and give myself the space I needed to deal with the emotions that I was dealing with. And interestingly enough, what come out even more from the experience was it forced me to start investigating things like vitamins and minerals far more than I'd ever done before. I decided that perhaps I needed some help. There was obviously the emotional impact of losing my cat was physically affecting me. So I did some research. And it's amazing what you can discover about your body and where certain vitamins and minerals have an impact on you as a person. I have now started taking a whole load of vitamins and minerals. I probably take on average 12 tablets a day, simply because I want my body to heal itself. I can work on the emotional, I can work on the actual physical infection, but I still need to have my body healthy. The osteopath has been doing a brilliant job at getting my back moving to the point where now I have very, very little pain. I occasionally have stiffness, but generally I have a lot more movement than I've had previously. So why have I shared all that? Well, it's a kind of celebration because it's allowed me to see what's really been going on in my life. And I spoke to my business coach the other day, and I shared with her that I was feeling overwhelmed. And as she kindly pointed out, I was dealing with grief, obviously. I was dealing with the infection as well. I was also looking at the fact that I wanted to, I suppose you could say I wanted to change my life, but I didn't know how because I was still too much in the grief of my cat passing. So it wasn't a good time anyway. But as she pointed out as well, the talk book, which had been my whole focus for about 3.5 months, had finally gone to print. So I had that. I had the freedom from that. And again, that would have impacted me in a form of relief, but in some ways grief, because something that had been my whole focus had actually come to an end. And that, added with everything else, was my body's way of saying to me, excuse me, it's time to stop. And typical, I didn't want to stop. And yet I did. There was this conflict going on in me. If I stopped, I'd probably feel, but if I didn't stop, I'd probably continue with the health issues, with the struggles that I'd been facing. Now, I share this not because I want your sympathy, far from it. I'm not one into sympathy, far from it. But I share because I want you to realize just how much everything connects. Whether it's financially, whether it's relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's grieving, it does not matter. Everything connects. And I've noticed also in allowing myself to recognize that my health is important, obviously, but also that my health is connected to how I feel exceedingly more than I realized, and does make a difference on what happens in my life. The tool book, as I say, and here it is, here's a copy of it, the Sloth or Beaver Know You Toolkit book. And if you're not actually watching this video but listening on audio, it is a A6 390 page book with the image of a sand dune that has been blown by the wind. So it's the sands of times kind of image where you've got the sand and it's created patterns. And it's a very simple book, just the front, Sloth or Beaver Know You Toolbook. And then on the back, it's got some words. The Know You Tool book provides you with the questions and insights to pause and reflect on how your past influences your present. And there's a quote from Anne. The questions linger with you. You unexpectedly find yourself thinking about them throughout the day. And my statement, you always have a choice to choose with awareness. You need to know yourself first. And these books arrived at the storage unit. I went to take them from the office where they'd taken them in for me and actually physically place them in my storage unit. I took a box of them and brought them home with me. And it was interesting. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything, in fact, about holding one in my hands and physically seeing it printed. It wasn't until I was networking online and shared arrived did I actually get excited about the fact it had arrived. Now, what I'm doing at the moment is mentioning it, but I haven't priced it yet. Because having now seen what it is and reading some of the questions physically in a book structure, I've realized that it's certainly more than just a book. Unlike a lot of books you buy, where you've got instructions on what to do and such like, and then some questions with an exercise to answer. This isn't like that. This is 366 physical questions that you can ask yourself, one a day if you choose to, with an intention of what you need the answer for, or just some clarity on a day that you feel confused, uncertain, or just needing to understand what's really going on in a relationship, in your career, because the questions and insights will give you the guidance and the coaching you need to find the answers. And interestingly, having been excited about the fact it had finally arrived in print, having seen what it involves, having made that realization of what it is for, I spoke about it with my coach, and she was saying, well, to price it, you've got to be really clear what it is and what it's not. And I said, I have. I know exactly what it is. I know exactly what it's not. Now I've just got to word it in a way that makes sense. And what came out of that conversation, which unfortunately was not recorded, which would have been very, very helpful if it had been, was that it's a lifetime tool. No matter how often you pick the book up, flip the pages and ask yourself the question, even if you get the same question several times, you will always give yourself a different answer. So it's a lifetime tool. It's also something that has you being able to look at life in a way you've probably never considered before. You've probably asked yourself questions. You've read the books. You've gone through the exercises. But this comes from a nervous breakdown. This comes from absolutely surrendering to what I needed to know and why certain things happened in the way they did. So it's unique in the sense of its questions that perhaps you wouldn't have asked yourself previously. Or perhaps you've worked with a coach or a therapist and they've given you some questions as you've been speaking to them. But this goes deeper than that because this is ongoing. You can coach yourself ongoing. You don't need to stop. You can use it more than once in a day. You can use it to ask different kinds of questions to get the guidance of what's going on in your life around different aspects of your life. But it's not set up in a way that, let's talk about this career situation. Let's talk about this relationship. Let's talk about this money. It does not matter what the question or desire you have to have an answer for. It does not matter. The questions will take you to where you need to be at that given moment in time. So I now know all of that. I still haven't decided the price. However, I am far more confident about how I want to position it. You do not write in the Sloth or Beaver Know You toolbook. It's not designed to be written in. That is why it is an A6. It's literally the questions. And those questions can either follow, depending on what you want to know, or they can be randomly chosen. It depends what your energy is doing. And as you can see, it's quite a thick book. It's quite a thick book. For those of you that can't see this, it is about, I don't know what we got. 1, 2, I think it's about 6 centimeters or about 6 centimeters across. It's quite thick paper. I deliberately made it so it lasted, so that you could use it for a lifetime. You can use it, anyone can use it, because you're not writing in it. You're using a separate journal to write what you gain from asking the questions. And I did exactly as I've suggested on how to use the book. I literally flipped the pages and I allowed the book to stop at the page it needed to stop at. And the page, based on what I've been sharing with you about how I've been feeling health-wise, about the lack of excitement, about the actual talk, it stopped on a page that I could have obviously taken one of two, because like any book, when you open a section, you get two sides. You get the left and you get the right. So there's actually two questions that I could read from and work with. And I did read both of them. And they're both sort of relevant. depending on how you view what I've just shared. On the right-hand side, it says, today, name 3 emotions you felt, big or small, comfortable or uncomfortable. Take a moment to consider how each emotion originated and how they manifested in your body, thoughts or behavior. Did you express, suppress, or work through them? Well, I think you know the answer to that one for me. Notice what these emotions teach you about your needs, boundaries, or desires. Well, I think we worked that one out. What do you need to support yourself at this moment and in the future? See, I can't even read properly at the moment. That's the first question, or the first series of questions. So, name 3 emotions. I think I did quite well on that, even though I didn't actually physically name them. I was very much aware of how I was feeling. So that's that one. And then on the left-hand side, it reads, bring awareness to a negative thought that repeats in your mind. Observe how it influences your mood, energy, or actions. Now, would you class grief as a negative thought? I would say so. Where does this thought originate from? Well, we know where my grief originated from. An experience, fear, or someone else's belief. Obviously, an experience. Is it true, or is it a story you've outgrown? It's true. I'm suffering grief. I'm going through grief, and I have mentioned this in previous podcasts. But I've also realized that the grief has changed, and the grief is affecting me in different ways to what it was originally. It's still very raw, but I'm seeing my life and I'm recognizing I'm doing things differently because of that grief. And it finishes, write the thought, then rephrase it using a positive statement to support your growth, worth, and potential. So there's 2 very relevant questions or statements with questions that apply to what is going on in my life at the moment. I could have basically taken the negative thought of grief and rephrased it to talk about my health and reframe how I handle my health. There's so much within each of these questions, even if I'm the one that wrote them for you. I can still see there is a lot of potential, even though it specified certain thoughts. That does not mean to say that you have to follow the question necessarily. Your own requirements may change the word from thought to feeling, depending on what you need. But you've got the basis of being able to understand what's going on for you and to be able to review, reflect, and if needed, reframe or release. So I'm excited to introduce you to the Sloth or Beaver Know You Toolbook. If you wish to have a copy when I've decided how much I'm going to charge for it, you can always go to the website, slotholbeaver.com, and put your name down for more information once I'm ready to release the price. I will consider doing them as special offer for a certain number. This is all printed by me. You cannot buy them anywhere else. I'm going to finish with a comment that is very relevant for me at the moment. I always have a choice. I can choose to keep living in my grief. I can choose to see it as a benefit, that it's allowed me to see my health in a different way. Not that I disrespected my health, but it has allowed me to see it in a different way, to acknowledge that I need that extra help at the moment. Through the vitamins, through the minerals, through the acupuncturist, through the osteopath, and whatever else I choose to support my health with. So I'm going to finish now with that statement. And I want you to consider, where in your life do you need to ask yourself questions, or to understand why something is happening and what you can learn from that, and how you can utilize that new knowledge to improve your life in whatever way is most appropriate.